Hello again, and we are continuing in our series, which is about Trinity Church, and that we develop people who are then able to join in God's work in the wider world. And so today might be called our Veterans Day version because we have one of our newer members of our church, Andy Murray. Good morning, Andy. How are you doing?
Good morning, Father. Very well. Thanks for this opportunity on Veterans Weekend. I appreciate it.
When did you first sense, God in your life was calling you to more than just going to church on Sundays?
Father, I was actually in Connecticut at the time, and I was going to school at Kent School in Kent, Connecticut. And at that time, I was participating in the Episcopal Church there as a sacristan. I began to feel as though I had a calling to the priesthood. And so, shortly after graduating from Kent, I actually entered into the seminary to discern a vocation to the priesthood. So I had been in the seminary for a couple of semesters, and I decided I wasn't quite ready at that point in time, and that I might return at some later date when I felt a little bit more prepared to do so. So I had moved on to another school, and shortly after I got to that next school, I ran into a Marine officer recruiter.
Wow, that's something. But there was a little twist that happened as you were considering that as a vocation. So tell us that little bit about that story.
Yeah, Father, I was just a couple of months away from graduation, and I was taking a summer course, the last of the credit hours that I needed, and I had developed a close friendship with one of my fellow students in this class that I was taking, and she had gotten to know me. She had gotten to know me as a person of faith. She was a person of faith, and one day when we got talking about what my plans for the future were, um, she asked me, how could a person of faith like myself consider joining an organization like the United States Marine Corps? And I was very taken aback by that question. But I realized immediately that she had a different perspective of what that sort of life might mean. And so I thought about it a little bit. I hadn't really considered it much. And I told her that it was my intent to live my Christian vocation through my life as a Marine officer. And at that point in time, I figured I would probably spend 4 years in the Marine Corps and then go back home to upstate New York and be a coach and a teacher the way my father had been.
Hmm.
But I ended up living that vocation as a Marine officer for over 30 years. And it was the most incredible experience. And looking back on it, I can't imagine having done anything else with my early adult life.
Were you ever deployed as a Marine?
Yeah, in fact, at my first duty station, which was out at Camp Pendleton, which is in California, about 30 minutes north of San Diego, I hadn't been there very long, and we actually went out to did a relatively brief, several week deployment out on board. Just happened that when I was out on board that ship for the time that I was out there, was looking forward to the opportunity to go to daily mass, and we had a number of folks on the ship with me, Marines and Navy personnel that hoped to be able to do that while we were out there. And what we found was there was not a chaplain assigned to the ship during the time that we were going to be deployed. And everything that was necessary was available. And I was told that if I had the capacity to lead communion services, that there was a stock of blessed Eucharist and that I could, in fact, lead communion service.
You also told another story that you had another kind of odd encounter that you wouldn't have expected, but that God put you in a certain place at a certain time.
Yeah, it was a wholly unique experience. And I had been in Kuwait for several months at this point. It was in preparation for what would become Desert Shield, Desert Storm. And as you mentioned, I had applied for a regular commission. So I was transitioning from a reserve commission to a regular commission. And there was an interview process in order to do this. Well, so I went and sat for several hours because he had several meetings that afternoon and evening. And He finally got done. He came out. He looked so tired. I figured the last thing he wanted was to sit down with some young lieutenant and do an interview for his augmentation to a regular commission. But he called me in. We went into his living spaces, and I sat down across from him, and he asked me to tell him a little bit about myself. And he asked me if I was, if I was a man of faith, if I was a churchgoer. And I told him my experience. I told him that I had thought that I might have a calling to the priesthood, but decided after some consideration to join the Marine Corps instead. And there was some sort of connection between us that opened his heart, opened my heart, and it was a chance encounter in the desert. His wife had passed away several months earlier, and he was having difficulty dealing with that while dealing with the challenges that he had in his command position. And I think what he was looking for was just simply an ear to listen to. So he never interviewed me, and he just talked, unburdened himself of some things that were creating some difficulty for him, creating some friction. And that was all that my interview consisted of.
What would you say, your primary vocation or call is right now today?
So I've gone from living my vocation as a Marine officer to living my vocation as husband to Pam and a father to our combined Brady Bunch family of 9 children. We only have 3 of them at home at this point, so Pam and I are actively raising 3 teenagers, 2 18-year-olds and a 15-year-old, 2 boys and a girl. But my vocation is my love and marriage, Pam, and the responsibility for loving and raising 3 young children. To all the veterans of Trinity and all the veterans of Terrafil, and just an opportunity to say thank you very much for your service.
So, Andy, thanks so much for your time this morning. So that's really what this series is about, is that we don't give simply to keep the doors open here at Trinity Church. We give toward a generous God in order that we might develop a community where people can be formed as disciples of Jesus wherever they are, at home, with kids, taking care of aging parents, serving God on the precipice of a battle in Kuwait. So it's an amazing thing, but that's what we do here at Trinity. And that's what we want to give toward when it comes up for our celebration Sunday. So thanks again, Andy, and we'll talk to you soon.